everybody, I'm Chad Eckert. It's not Eric Martin's. This is the Fantasy Golf Pod. So you know us, cracking beers, clicking names. There's no names to click, but I'm still drinking a Coors Light. Hello again, friends. Welcome to another edition of the interview series. It is Sunday, April 5th. The earth is still sportsless. Everybody is still sad. But you guys, I almost can't believe it myself. My guest today for the interview is an actual expert, someone that is paid by the PGA Tour as a fantasy insider. Rob Bolton's here, guys. Rob! Yes!
That's a hell of an introduction, buddy. Appreciate it, Chad. And that looks awfully tasty cold, by the way. I wish I had one to share with you.
Yeah, well, you know, we're beer guys, so I use it as an excuse to have a beer at 3 o'clock on a Sunday. And you have worked, like I said, for the PGA Tour for what? Has it been 10 years? Because I've been reading you, Rob, for 25, I feel like, since I was 10 years old.
Thanks.
I mean, how long have you been doing this stuff? Forever, right?
Started in 2010, January, first right out of the gate for the, what was it then? The SBS or whatever it was, the Kapalua event.
Yeah.
So ever since then, every week. Yeah, it's been great.
That's awesome. Okay, and now, do you know where you are? Are you confused, Rob? This is the Fantasy Golf Pod. We don't have real people show up to this thing with real resumes.
Great point. That's a great point.
Do you even know who we are? Do you know where you are, Rob?
Well, when you bang on my door loud enough and long enough, I have no choice.
Yeah, exactly.
But then again, in the void of where we are as a society right now, you're loud and clear. Look, this is the first conversation.
Talk to this guy.
Yeah, man. This is the first conversation I've had about fantasy golf in any capacity in like a month. I mean, I was at the Players through that Thursday morning. When I left town, I was all systems go. I mean, there was conversations and everything at the time. So what's that now? 3 weeks ago, I guess, 3.5, something like that. And it's been a blur. I've joked that every day is different, but it feels the same. No one really knows what's going on. I think we're all in the same boat. Everybody wants answers. We all like answers, but can't force it at the same time. So in the meantime, we might as well have a conversation.
Works for the PGA Tour, Rob, you don't get answers. No one's telling you, hey, this is what we're going to start in August or whatever. Have you heard anything?
Yeah, I wish, and if I had that, obviously I'd have to defer to the people in charge. Technically, I've always been a freelancer. I've always worked virtually. As you know, in this industry, there's a lot more people that you know than you've met. And in this day and age, that's kind of where we are. And, it was only a couple of, 16 months ago, I finally met Mike Glasgow, who I've been working with for several years. Motor World, we finally connected. We hugged it out naturally, but it was weird. It was like, man, we felt like it was like a reunion you never know that you'd enjoy type of thing, even though you've never met in the first place. So my employment status has always been that. So anytime something is passed along to me, it's usually by a reader, because they're the ones that are keeping even a stronger pulse of things than I am. I'm not exaggerating either. Sometimes that's the case.
Now, you've been doing this since 1994. Is this true? I mean, God, so, was there even fantasy golf then? Like, what? I
wasn't even married yet, and my wife and I just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. So it was December of '93. We had our first draft. Had a buddy in college, first guy that ever gave me a paid writing gig. In fact, his dad started a league with my buddy's maternal grandfather. Together, we drafted in the basement. The trash talking was right out of the gate. It was great. 10 of us. Rotisserie style format, and we've always kept that, where no one owns the same golfer in every season. It's full season, every official event, so on and so forth. So it was a derivative of the old rotisserie sort of baseball and football leagues back in the day. And I took the league over in '98, and it's been outstanding. So yeah, I've been playing since '94, fantasy golf in some format, and then when Yahoo basically took over what was the early 2000s and planted a game for the masses on the internet and established itself as the cornerstone fantasy golf, that's when I started paying more attention to it online. But I was already playing for it for about 5 to 8 years, somewhere in there.
So you're telling me your father, your grandfather, this is like a family thing? They passed it down to you kind of thing, or what?
A buddy and
A
his
buddy. Okay.
father and
Oh,
his
okay.
grandfather, but his father's father-in-law. So it was both sides of his family were into it.
And so it
And
was rotisserie style? Did you use like
yeah.
birdies and stuff like that or whatever?
Uh, at the time, we started with 10 teams, 10 golfers per team, and we counted only actual top tens. No, fantasy
Okay.
top tens. So if a guy wasn't owned, you would just go to the top 10.
Nice.
And look, it was rudimentary, got us off the ground, and it was fun for for a period of time until we started realizing how it needed to get better. And we've always evolved since. So I've always enjoyed that. Like, that's why I have those rules of fantasy golf. My number 3 rules remain fluid. I mean, my fantasy league is exactly that. We've always changed. Once we find something, we let time pass a little bit, but it's always about making sure that you're staying in touch with what's most interesting, especially with the FedEx Cup era. We overhauled everything with 07. In fact, we did an entire like a makeshift league in 06 on the side of what we were actually doing, just to see if it would make sense if we were using FedEx Cup points in 06 before it became official in 07. So I've always sort of been thinking ahead, and I'm still doing that today. And that's the kind of stuff that gets me up in the morning, because it's always different. As you know, every week is different, but every year is different. Every season is different.
Yahoo was our thing. That's basically what Eric and I used to play. I commissioned a league and we got that going. That was forever. And then they killed it. And that's kind of what started this podcast, is that we were sad. And so we started talking about DFS more. How did you get involved? Because you wrote for Yahoo too. So you started as a user and then you became part of Yahoo Sports. Tell us about that.
So actually, 2 things. Fantasy golf isn't anything unless it's a support group. So it makes sense. I see you drinking the cold one right now. I mean, it's kind of what it's all about. Things born out of things that have failed. It's a beautiful thing about it, and I love that part of the community, because we've all experienced it. If you haven't yet, you will. I've never written for Yahoo. No.
Okay.
I've written about Yahoo. I did that at the PGA. So I came on in 2010. At the tour's website. Prior to that, my editor had been with other organizations and publications, print and digital, for a number of years. He was hired a year or so before I was brought on, and he wanted to hire somebody in-house. Prior to me, Scott Pianowski of Yahoo.
Okay, because he did NFL too, right?
He's done a lot. Yeah. He's done NFL and he's done baseball and probably lots of things. But at the time, he was Yahoo's golf guy. And the tour had purchased the feed that Yahoo had, so you could read them at Yahoo, you could read them at the tour and other places, I'm sure. But my editor, Mike McAllister, who's still in the chair as managing editor at PGATour.com, wanted somebody in house, and here I am. So ever since, it's been that model, and it's worked out terrific.
So is this basically then? I mean, it's been 25 years. This has been your only job pretty much of your life, or that's pretty cool.
No, I wish. In fact, I was working at Rotorworld from 2008 to 2009. Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about before we spoke today, how much of this background you really want, because we could go in an hour.
Dude, you have a background. That's why I said we don't have real guests with real resumes. We don't really talk to 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds and young guys that are just getting into it. I mean, tell us what it was like just a general outline of just getting into the bit, working for PGATour.com. Were you like the only writer and everyone's like, no one's reading this?
Yeah, if you don't mind, let me just take you back. I was thinking the only way I can really draw this over time is to take you back 30 years, 40 years now. When I was like 7 and I was looking at the backs of baseball cards, and then I remember the blackout in New York City that was on TV at the time for some reason, where I lived outside Chicago. That was a big deal. And I remember looking at my baseball cards and the lights went on TV and I got very scared. I remember that sort of thing. But then the lights came back on and I was thinking, man, why did that affect me so oddly? I'm like, I love baseball and baseball cards. I used to start with simple games on my bed, kneeling on the floor with my baseball cards. Everybody, what would my lineup be like and all that sort of thing. A lot of people do that, right, at a very young age. And then I started playing dice baseball with a neighbor, a buddy who lived around the block. We started playing these homemade dice baseball games and started developing our own rules and stats. And we loved the offense, so the pitchers were getting throttled, and an ERA of 10 was really good, that sort of stuff. But it forced us to do the math, and then fast forward to college. I never wrote in high school. I was more into music.
Okay.
I stopped playing baseball when I was 13, and then sort of got away from sports, went back into sports in college when accounting, it was a great thing for me, but it was the wrong time of my life. So I ended up gravitating toward sports broadcasting and writing in college. Met the right people. And Todd McMahon, who's a longtime friend of mine, he was in my wedding. He's the guy who got me involved. His dad, his grandfather were the fantasy golf eventually, but also he was the editor of the sports section at the student newspaper at Northern Illinois University, which is where I graduated in '93. So we started writing together, started covering, various sports, and putting in my time and cutting my teeth at that level. It was still a paid gig, and it was actually a pretty good paid gig back in college. I was going to get into it after college. I had made my connections in Chicago. I had planned on living in places you've never heard of for 10 years before I finally established myself. I really wanted to be a weekend sports anchor on a television at a major network in the country. That was sort of my ultimate goal. I figured I had the right capacity for it at that time. Ended up meeting a girl, and she didn't want to move. So I made a really tough decision not to pursue my dream. Fortunately, we're still together. So she's the only wife I've ever had. So
okay, girl. You met the girl.
The girl. Yeah, I mean, you just know. There's just a moment. In fact, we just celebrated our 28th anniversary as a couple yesterday. So
wow.
It's funny how I just remembered that. Anyway, so I went into insurance, but I went into many other industries. I was in insurance for 5 years. I was in minor league baseball for 3 years, one year full time. I was in telecom. I was lots and lots, over 20 jobs since college. But I always wrote on the side. Was always stringing for local newspapers in Grand Rapids, Michigan, outside Chicago. Did a couple things for other Midwestern publications.
Was it always golf though? It was always golf or
never,
anything?
Like rarely golf. Okay. Did golf a couple of times. My first golf story, other than like one in college or a couple in college, I tried to follow the team that wasn't very good. And it conflicted with some other assignments, so they didn't get a lot of coverage because they weren't really good. They were good guys, but they were pushed off the back page. Okay. Was in St. Charles, like in I don't know, sometime in the 90s. St. Charles, Illinois, outside Chicago, and it was a match play event, and it was a great event. I'm like, man, I dig this, and I was already playing fantasy golf for several years. Okay. But the actual thing was so different, and to get out there and actually walk a tournament like that was pretty special.
So that inspires you. That moment is the one moment that kind of gave you the spark to go for it, or do you think that was the pivotal moment? Where did you get that cross in the road that's like, here's PGA Tour and here's a real dumb job?
So that's another overarching sort of philosophy. I've always wanted to be sort of a Renaissance man. I don't know how you can possibly make that a goal in life, but sure. Those types of people have always fascinated me. Okay. There have been a few in golf, and it's a very short list of golfers who have done other great things outside of golf. And I'm not talking about philanthropy. I'm talking about actual work, where they've done something special. Not too many. And in fact, in sports, because of the requirement to be really good, you don't have much time for that. But that sort of thing where I'm like, I have one life. I want to maximize it. Well, the problem was figuring out how to do that. And then I realized once I got good at understanding golf and playing fantasy golf and starting to understand that the internet was coming along, maybe if I just focused on one thing, I could be the best at it, or at least try to be the best at it.
Okay.
And that has ever since Rotor World gave me an opportunity to start writing in 2008, that has been the mission. That has been my goal. No one will outwork me. No one will outknow what I know. I'll always be the guy that you can contact. I'll never be the guy that will give you a hard time, or, you know what I mean? Get up in your face.
You've done it. You've literally done it. You become that person. Like, you have been that person my entire fantasy golf life. Like,
that's very sweet of you.
So
thanks.
You're the OG. You did it. You got there.
Thanks.
So PGA Tour comes calling, or do you have to knock on their door? How'd you get that gig? And you've kept it for long enough.
That's another crazy story, because my boss now, Mike, was walking around the office, he was asking people if anybody knew anybody who wrote fantasy golf. And there was a producer at the time, Nick Zaccardi is his name. And he's currently the guy who covers the Olympics for NBCSports.com.
Oh, wow.
So he's gone on to something terrific for him. The short story is Nick's like, yeah, check out Rob Bolton over at rotoworld.com. And eventually Mike reached out and we struck a deal. I was writing at Rotoworld, but I was also delivering the mail for a small town near Rockford, Illinois. I needed to pay the bills. I had a young
mailman,
boy.
like bagels.
Yeah. That was, anything. That's one of the 20 jobs, that type of thing.
Sure.
Delivered the mail for a couple of years. Come to find out later that Nick grew up in the same, or lived in the same town where I grew up for several years, but not at the same time. This little town, Western Springs, Illinois, where I'm from. I lived there for 19 years. And he had lived there shortly after. He had moved there shortly after I had moved away from that town in 1990. And we find out that, it got to the point where he was telling me where he's from. Like, yeah, well, no, I'm from Chicagoland too. Where are you from? And because, you say you're from Chicago.
It was like,
well, let's dial that down. Yeah. And he's like, well, I'm like, then what street? And he's like, I'm like, well, I played at that park when I was visiting my grandparents when I was like 10. He's like, dude, I played on that same swing. I mean, it got all the way down to that. And it was really one of those moments where you step away from because back then
this is divine intervention.
We were doing the AOL instant. Yeah. We were doing the AOL instant messenger at the time. We were typing, and it was late on a Sunday night and we were getting into that grant. I'm like, I looked at the screen. I'm like, whoa, wow. And so it was because of Nick that Mike was made aware of me. And so Nick and I finally met, was it 2014 or 2015 at the TPC Sawgrass. It took everything I had not to give him a giant hug,
Yeah, right.
So we settled for a good handshake.
Yeah,
back when handshakes were still in vogue,
So there, then you just have done this ever since. You're just writing power rankings and things like that every week. You're kind of just you work on site. Where are you quarantined at the moment?
Yeah, so I live in the West Valley of Phoenix, Arizona. I moved here in the summer of 13.
Arizona. No, you don't have DraftKings. Oh no.
No, I don't have DraftKings. Although they have allowed a way to manipulate the URL and stop the refresh and still get in. I mean, I think that's on purpose. If you spend enough time trying to figure it out, I hope I haven't.
Whatever. If you're that into it, then you're 1-800-GAMBLER.com or whatever.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's never been allowed out here. Anyway, so I started in Rotoworld at 08, moved here in 13. I worked at Rotoworld through 15. So I worked at both jobs from 2010 through 2015.
Oh, okay.
So 6 total years. So at Rotoworld, I mean, I had goals that I wanted to accomplish on that site too when I started in January of 08, and modest team of 2, ended up building up to a team of 6, and it was great. I mean, they allowed us to do so many different things, really, whatever we wanted, to make sure that we built an audience there. And it just got to the point where I couldn't physically, mentally pull both jobs anymore. And so at the end of 15, I ended up sort of throwing an ultimatum. Like, look,
nice. Yeah. I mean,
this has to work or I'm done.
Up. You could do that at that point, I guess.
Yeah. I never know though. Right. It's not like I have an agent, you're doing it for yourself and trying to make it happen.
Okay. So you've written this article now. I've read it forever. You're writing power rankings and all this stuff and fantasy stuff. Yeah. We've been asking people we're talking to if they have a proud moment in the history of their betting or their power rankings, for your example. Do you have a week where you hit all top 10 or you hit 7 of the top 10 or do you have a shining moment that
it's interesting,
hang on the back of your trophy shelf?
That's an interesting question. So again, my philosophy is as long as the check clears, I know I'm doing my job. Honestly, being a husband, being a father, as long as I'm getting paid, like that sounds like a sellout sort of thing to say. It's not, because I understand that I have a level of respect out there and I'm doing the proper job for what I'm paid.
No, I think I hear you. I think it's more just like you're doing power rankings. You're trying to predict the future, which is impossible to do. So, okay,
Yeah.
I have
See,
proud
that's
moments, but it's a blind squirrel finds nuts too.
yeah.
At the same time.
No, see, I don't even look at it that way. The power rankings
Okay.
is an amalgamation of various ways to analyze a tournament. It's not a prediction. I've never used the word predict, prediction, predictor. I'm a
A tout?
prognosticator. Yeah, I guess. But yeah, there's that. I'm not going to, like you say, expert. I would never use that phrase. I mean,
Right.
what does that mean?
No,
But,
I have to put that on you for sure. You don't want to be that. That's
right.
Yeah.
If you want to use that, you can use that. But I don't see it that way because I'm always learning, and so I don't know what expert means. But that aside, if the power rankings, if the tournament, the top 15 finish exactly as they had them, I mean, that's the way the projections have them finishing as I see them. I'm going to be wrong every week because that's never happened, but it's not about me. It's about how you take that information and use it for yourself. And then what do you learn? Honestly, I feel like I'm more of an educator. You come to me if you need me. I'll always be there, God willing. Let's hope so. And then if you don't need me anymore, congratulations, you've graduated. Good luck to you.
Exactly.
And I'll always be there still if you want to chat or whatever. We've built a relationship, even if we never actually communicated directly. You know who I am, you know how I work, that sort of thing. However, I will say back in the day, just to answer the question directly, it was my first Masters 08 at Roto World, my first major. And I really didn't know what I was doing yet in terms of how to connect with the audience, even though I'd been playing fantasy golf for 15 years almost then. I knew what I was doing for me, but not for you, and there was a guy somewhere who won $12,000 on my top 5 because 4 of the 5 finished in the top 5 or top 10 or something like that, because he just went with it. And he didn't know who I was, but like, here's a guy that seems like he knows what he's doing,
And so you hooked some dude up with 12 grand.
He won 12 grand. I used to have the email. I should have printed it up and framed it because that was an inspiring moment. I'm like, okay, that validates or legitimizes me in some way. The emails prior to that were not as.
I mean, it's one at a time, yeah. Rob.
Hey, that's all it takes, right? All it takes. It's like a golf shot. It's literally like golf. You hit the one shot that you didn't think you could do, and it has you coming back for more. And you're not. They're all not going to be like that. So I never really look at it internally like that. It's always about how what I can present to you helps you, and then you take that forward, and maybe you help yourself, maybe you help a buddy, maybe you help your community. And it just grows from there. That's what I espouse on a daily basis.
So, okay, they're projections, but what do you take and put into those projections? What's the most important thing? Who becomes number one? How do you factor it? What do you do?
Good question. Fair question. It's not one thing. Sometimes it's one thing. Like if you thought about, back in the Zach Johnson at TBC Deer Run, obviously, when he was killing it, that's the type of thing. Luke Donald at the Heritage, even though he never won it, that sort of thing where it's so obvious. Like as long as he's not done anything wrong or done anything recently that makes you believe, or somebody else is coming on really strong, would have to come on, It's funny because the actual ranking itself is the last thing I do every time before I file. It's like the last 10 minutes of a several hour project, many, many, many hours of researching and writing and compiling and ruling out and all that sort of good stuff. The actual ranking, I don't even see it as a ranking per se. And this is sort of like peeling back the curtain a little bit more. I wish it was just sort of like the top 10, top 15. Here's a pool. Right. This is not how it works. I don't mind a ranking. It's just that's not the way I go into it. But
that's not what the millennials want, Rob.
No. It's good. I'm not resisting. I'm just saying. I'm just being honest with it because, you do need a number one, and it just depends on the week. And the thing is, it's not just one thing. It really is a combination of things. I will say that, and I'll never ever lean back on you trusting me or anything, any perception of an identity that I have or weight in the room that I have. I always need to validate it quantitatively. However, I will say that my experience is something I really can't quantify.
Sure.
And so sometimes it's I've done this before. I know what I'm doing. I know why this is. So if I was challenged, I would be able to answer that question directly. Right. So The better question would be the next time that you wonder why a guy's number one, ask me that, and I can answer it in the space of that week.
You're like, look, man, I've developed this gut over 25 years. Okay, so just trust my gut. This is my gut. It's not your gut.
But it's never that though. Like I hate gut feeling. I hate that phrase because anybody could put together a 15. But why? What's the why behind it?
Right. So then, do you have a rule of thumb, or do you have something that you rely on, and you say, is it course history? Is that more important than recent form, or do you have a rule of thumb? Because I say, hey, this guy's powered through with his irons, but he was bad with his putter. I'm going to look at him next week. Maybe the putter turns around and his irons stay hot. Is there a rule of thumb you rely on?
See, that's the fascinating conversation. I wish we had more time for every week. It's okay. So that's a great point. But now let's talk about, but on this course, he's never putted bad. So how do you rule out the fact that he's not going to turn around on a course where he's most comfortable? Right. So it's golfer specific, it's tournament specific. And so a guy like, you think about Andrew Landry winning after missing 7 or 8 cuts in a row, Angel Cabrera winning the Masters after having a horrible run, Stuart Appleby winning many, many, many years ago after going like 0 for 9 and winning and playing for 10 straight weeks. Finally, where does that come from? Well, you have to leave room for that. And you don't rule it out, even though mathematically, again, I don't go into it trying to be right. That's not the point. Like, it's not about predicting. It's about assessing every golfer in a specific week on a specific course and all the variables that are presented to you. That's why every week, every day is so different. I don't go with models. I don't go with rankings of stats. I use them, but I'm not beholden to them. So it's always an organic process. And I don't mean to sound like I'm trying to dodge the question. I really am not. It really depends on the week. And let's go through it. And then by the time I'm done with it, because I'm a decent writer and I think logically and I understand the numbers and I think I can convey them in a way that you can understand all of that and in a compelling way so that either you agree or disagree, because my job isn't for you to agree, it's for you to make a decision. All of that combined, at some point, you'll be like, you know what? I know what I'm going to do and I disagree with you, or I know I'm going to do. I'm like, you're absolutely right. Then you go and do it. You make a decision. I've always said this as well. My number one enemy is silence. If you disagree, great. But if you don't have any response, if you don't walk away from what I've done without making a decision, I have wasted my time and I've wasted your time, which is even worse.
That's smart. I like that. So before I get you out of here, I want to throw some questions at you, some quick questions that's kind of just topical stuff.
Yeah.
Do they play the Masters in October or this fall? Do you think they get a Masters in 2020?
It's speculation, right? Yes or no, who knows? I would say I'm more curious how it applies to which season it's in. If it's played in the fall, does that mean we're going to have 2 Masters in 2020, 21? I haven't heard any conversation about that. I have actually asked that question and I have not been answered. So I don't know. I would say they'll do whatever they can to get it in. Sure.
So the same with the Ryder Cup?
Boy, that's a whole different conversation because, it's a different governing body. But yeah, same answer. But again, you can shift. We saw in 2001, everything was shifted back a year with 9/11. So that could certainly happen again easily.
You do a rookie rankings every week. You kind of follow the rookies. Now, not necessarily the actual rookies, but of the young crop, the Ims, the Hovlands, the Wolfs, the Niemans, the Morikawas. Who's the one? Who's your guy that you'd be like, listen, if I got to put my kid's college tuition gamble on this guy, this is the one?
Well, first of all, I light up when you say rookie ranking because I invented that. And it's been one of my calling cards at the tour. Same thing with the qualifiers page, which was tried to get killed a couple of years in. I'm like, no, you got to give it time. People want this. They need this. They need that one-stop shop. They need a place to go.
I was going to say, that's one of my next questions.
And it has been a staple for the website over time. And hopefully it's not going to go anywhere soon. I'm sure it'll stay as long as I'm around. I love everything about Colin Morikawa, right? But it depends on how young you want to go. Justin Thomas, certainly. But we already know enough about him. As far as the young guys, Morikawa is just, what I love about him isn't so much the fact that he's TD Green strong and that'll play everywhere. And he'll learn the greens as a putter. He'll get better at that. It's what he has between his ears. But so many of these guys already are fully formed. At such a young age. And we're going to just continue to see more of that. The curious thing is guys like, Jordan Spieth, Ricky Fowler a little bit. I mean, they're in their upper 20s, Fowler's now 30. I mean, these are the guys that what has happened, why has it happened? Life is going to start getting in the way. Typically, you see that on the LPGA when the women want to start becoming mothers, and they're already past their prime. Whereas the guys are entering their prime at 30 to 35. It's
Right.
later, and they don't have the same lifestyle. So obviously, it's a curious thing. But Morikawa's, I use this word a lot, sort of in jest, but also very seriously. His comportment. It's an unusual word. And every time you hear it, it's like, what does that mean? Just how balanced he is throughout his life right now. It's really impressive. So he'd be the guy.
Okay, then in 5 years, 2025,
Okay.
number one in the world, killer, who's the best? Is it Rory still? Are we going to look at JT at that point? 5 years down the line, Rahm, he's a little bit older and more mature. Who do you got as your guy in 5 years?
John Rahm.
Okay.
I mean, I loved him. What we were starting to see from him later, and of everything he's done has been out in front for us to see, and he's never been bashful about sharing his emotion. He's never been bashful about acknowledging that that's been a problem or a weakness, or however you want to define it, for him, and that he's getting better at it. Now he's married, and there's a balance there that should create simplicity inside the ropes, or at least yield it over time. Obviously, he's long off the tee. That will always play. That'll always be important. That's why, compared to Hovland and Morikawa and him, not that those guys are short, but Rahm, is just in a different league from that capacity. And he's of the similar generation. I mean, he's only a couple years older than those guys. So he'd be the guy I'd target in a heartbeat.
Okay.
Not that McIlroy's going far anyway, but obviously McIlroy's a few years older.
Okay. Well, so Rob, what are you going to do with yourself in the meantime? Are you just writing all negative news? That's what Eric Patterson told us. Are you just all of the negative news stuff?
Eric Patterson said I'm writing negative news?
No, he is. He's saying for the score.
Is.
I mean, that's all he can do now. It's just everything's canceled. Everything's bad.
Yeah, I'm like an eternal optimist. If you're ever in a bad mood, give me a call because I'll talk you out of it. That's one thing that fatherhood has taught me, because every day, plus all of my failure in life, the background is a lot of failure. I have been let go from a job in every way you could possibly conceive, and multiple times at that, depending on which way. And I'm still here. I'm still smiling, and I'm still. And I get to do what I love to do every day. So talk
to me. You get to talk to me, Rob. What a great life you live.
When does this end? What do we? No,
I really do appreciate it. You have no idea. This is an honor. I've been kind of nervous to do this.
Stop. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, this is great. No, as far you're a kind soul, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Chad.
Well, hey, if we don't have anything to do the rest of the summer and this stuff's canceled all the way through September, I'm calling you back. We're doing it again. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the things that we covered very shallowly here.
I guarantee that as soon as you tweet this, you're going to lose 2 followers. Honest to God. That's how it usually works with me.
Yeah, we'll get muted.
I never keep track of my followers, but I've been curious how the followers on Twitter have been for me during the shutdown, and I've lost 39.
Okay, that's not too bad.
The latest math. Well, it's just funny how I've noticed that. I never ever in fact, I asked Twitter a few years ago how I can disable the numbers. Because,
you don't care.
Because Twitter should be about quality, not quantity.
Correct.
That's another philosophy I have anyway.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to just provide quality value with these interviews, and at least there's something to look at.
Please, yeah, as long as it's fresh and compelling and rich, right? Look, we're doing all-time power rankings for the foreseeable future, so I'm working on the one for the Masters right now. We did one for Valero, and it already had people chirping.
Yeah, the Hoffman. I saw.
Yeah, it was great. I'm
I wonder who you have as the Masters number one. Or is it a question? Maybe it is a question. I don't know, Sevy. I don't know.
It's pretty straightforward. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Rob,
it's going to be a little bit.
I'm letting you go.
Yeah.
You got to get back to your regular life. I got to go deal with my children, as you know.
All right, buddy.
But I appreciate you. Talk to you later.
Hey, you're the best. Thanks again. Take care.
Thanks, Rob.